Hey everyone, just recently I started messing around with the Foundry VTT and I posted some screenshots on Twitter and Discord and was asked about my setup, so I thought I'd give you all a tour on what I have so far. But before we dig into it, just so you know, you can always find me and ask questions and talk tabletop role-playing games or miniature war games or whatever on Twitter at HeyGMKenny, or you can swing by my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/HeyGMKenny. Links to those are in the description. So come hang out and have a good time. Also, I'm going to have a crucial tip that I had trouble understanding when making the switch over to Foundry at the end, so make sure to stick around until then. First, the Forbidden Lands system for Foundry is right now unofficial. It works really well, but there's a lot of additional modules and stuff that I have installed to make it look and run the way that it does. I'll go through and talk about all of these a little bit later, and I'll also be posting some links in the description for you to download if you want to make your game look like mine. First, we have the big Forbidden Lands scene or map. This is a really high-res map that was free to download on the Free League forums. It's a Photoshop file, but if you don't have Photoshop, don't worry. The link in the description is a PNG file that I use, which is basically just the flat image with the English text. There's no additional layers. It's worth noting that the map image does not have the grid on it, which is great, but that means that you'll need to add your own grid. Okay, so here are my settings for the grid. I have the grid set to be 300 pixels in size, offset by 86 pixels horizontally and 13 vertically. My distance is set to 10 kilometers, which is what the map suggests, but you can make that shorter or longer depending on how big of a game that you want. The scene dimensions of here are 8563 by 6201. It may not fill that information in automatically, but it's important to make sure that yours is like that too if you're using this image. I have the token vision selected and the fog of war exploration. This is what makes the map look like this when your players are on here, because I want my players to discover the Forbidden Lands organically. I set my map to these dimensions basically to get the 10 kilometer scale centered within a hex, as you can see here, but that's probably just for my brain. So if your brain doesn't need that, you may not need to do it like I did. Okay, here we have our quarter day tracker, which is a beautiful image made by somebody in the Forbidden Lands Discord who was kind enough to put it up for everyone to download. I also took the Raven rune from the book and gave it a small green glow in Photoshop, and I use this as a tracker to keep our quarter days more organized. You can see we can just kind of click and drag it wherever we want. Also, if you're new to Foundry, if you don't know already, when you click and drag something, sometimes it snaps to the grid, but if you hold shift, you can place it wherever you like. If you use this file, you may need to flip it. I flipped mine negative 180 degrees. That's what put the nighttime up top. You can just, do it however you like. You can also adjust the size of the tile from here, but keep in mind that it's a perfect square, so your width and height should be the same. Mine is 677 pixels squared, which is kind of arbitrary, but it's nice looking. And if you want to adjust the Raven, you can also do that by double-clicking the Raven rune. And right here, mine is 223 pixels by 168 pixels with no rotation. As far as the character sheets go, I don't have anything special here. I have armor, weapons, and talents, and some gear, just as I need it, kind of filled out in my items directory. But I keep everything organized with folders and subfolders. All of this is included in the unofficial Forbidden Lands system, so nothing here is different than what you might have. You do need to fill out the armor and weapons and gear and spells and all that kind of thing manually though. I did want to give a special shout out here to the Roll Advantage token stamp website, which made making hexagonal tokens super incredibly easy. I use it for all the player character images as well as the party image to fit perfectly on the grid in Foundry. Link to this is in the description below. Before moving on to the next scene, I want to take a look at the party sheet over here. This is included in a module that I have installed. Again, this module is fan-made, and it works great for exploration and overland travel, which is what Forbidden Land is all about. The main page here is where you can drag and drop all of your character sheets to include them in the party, which is important because the travel tab will use this to basically populate it. So over on the travel tab, we have all of the overland travel activities that you'll be doing across the Forbidden Lands, each with its own rules reference, which you can get by just clicking the little book icons. From here, you can drag and drop your character into any of the activities that you're going to be performing, which will be your job for the quarter day. You can also roll directly from the travel sheet, which populates nicely in the chat, giving the character name and the activity being performed to keep everything nice and organized. Sometimes before rolling, the sheet will ask you to open the character sheet before the roll. That's just so it can get the appropriate amount of dice. But otherwise, you just click the skill that you want and it will give you all the dice that you need. Okay, so next we're on to our adventure site, the Hollows, which is from the Game Master's Guide. As you can see, we have our quarter day tracker up here, still in the corner with our Raven Rune. The image that I'm using here is from the Forbidden Lands download section on Free League's website. All of this is for free. You'll notice though that I have all these little green journals. These are all pins to journal entries that I've made. All of these locations are places that the players can visit, places with descriptions, which is going to save me a lot of time from repeating myself or something getting lost in translation between mics cutting out and any other issue involving the internet. So by double clicking, for instance, this tavern here, we see that it is the Dead Man's Hand. We get the description of the inn, and then we have some notes that are either made by myself or the players when we're playing the game. We also have some links here made notable by the little open book that we can click. So when we click the Rust Brothers, it gives us a little bit of history and lore, which also has some keywords in here. And then some Rust Brothers encounters, where we note that the players encountered a Rust Brother in the Hollows eating at the Dead Man's Hand Inn. Again, this stuff is purely for the players. As I have access to the books and all the GM information, I just want my players to be able to refresh their memories without me explaining things to them again, which keeps the game time focused on the game. It's a bit of work for sure, but when you've got the time, you may as well go through so you can get the most out of your weekly game. So while we're here, we might as well show off some of the other modules I have installed. As you can see down here, I have a macro bar full of interesting icons and functions. We have Drawing Initiative, which produces a number between 1 and 10, non-repeating, of course, until they've all been drawn. And then we have Reset Initiative, which just resets those numbers. Conditions basically produces a small chat box, just like that. And all of these are links to the conditions so that everybody has an easy reference. The dice roller to me is the best one, because I don't want to create a character sheet for every NPC and instead just want to roll some dice when I need to. Clicking this macro brings up the roller dice box, which I can populate however I wish, and then it rolls Forbidden Lands dice. The next macro pushes the last die roll that was made, which is obviously useful. The next macro is the D66 macro, which just gives us a number between 11 and 66, good for critical injuries and random tables in the game. And finally, these last three are weather effects made possible by the FXMaster Module. Sometimes it seems like they don't work very well, but the ones that do work really nicely. Definitely recommend installing. Of course, you don't need to use the macro to get these weather effects going. You can also use the toolbar, which brings up a selector menu and all of the weather effects. I am a big fan of the rain, clouds, and crows, which gives me the most perfect Forbidden Lands atmosphere. If you want to add more to this kind of experience, you can download the Soundboard by Blitz module, which adds some sound effects like rain and thunder, chanting cults, monster roars, etc. As far as sound effects go, I would love to just use Sirenscape, but it seems that there's some weird integration stuff happening with that people are trying to work out. So this is the next best thing as far as I've found. Finally, with my modules, you can see that my journal entries have the same kind of graphic layout and text that appears in the Forbidden Lands books. This is thanks to the custom CSS module, which adds some other slight graphical adjustments to the Foundry VTT, which like removing the anvil logo up here and also using cooler colors over here. The rest of my setup is purely manual text and screen snipping tables and charts for easy reference. You can see here that I've just snipped this table from the core rulebook instead of creating a rollable table. That's just for purely time. The one thing I try to do with my journal entries is to make sure that players are always listed as observers. You can do this by right-clicking your journal entry, going to configure permissions, and making sure they are listed as observers. Since I'm not running the game via Foundry, my players should be able to see and edit almost everything on here. All of the reference I'm using to run the game comes from the books and PDFs, which cuts down on the workload of just copy and pasting everything over. It also gives my players more room to explore the world of Forbidden Lands and refresh their memories and do their own research while we're playing the game. So at the beginning of this video, I also mentioned I'm going to give a big tip that would have saved me a lot of time. I probably wasted too much time trying to get through new images into my game, and I couldn't figure out how to get rid of old images that I no longer wanted in my files. So in an effort to save you all the time that I wasted, here's all you need to do. First, you need to get Foundry up and going. Then you go down here to your taskbar, and you're going to right-click the Foundry icon, go to Browse User Data. This is going to pull up a window, and you're going to double-click Data. And then you can make a new folder in here. I made one for Forbidden Lands, but you can use whatever game you're playing. And once you have this folder made, you drag and drop all of your image files that you're going to be using from Foundry into here. And you could probably make various subfolders if you wanted to get more organized. I would recommend it. And of course, you can delete files and rename them all in here also, and it shows up in your Foundry virtual tabletop. Just remember, if you rename them, to select the new file so you don't have a bunch of broken image links laying around. And I think that's everything. If you've made it this far, thanks a ton. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me over on Twitter and Twitch. I also have a blog that I update pretty regularly with short stories based on my Forbidden Lands game and other stuff, as well as tabletop RPG reviews, miniature painting tips, and pretty much whatever I want to write about. So make sure to check that out. Until next time, take care of yourself.